Let her rip.
Brilliant. So, Kerry, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on. Welcome. Just for my listeners who are at home might not know who you are, Kerry, you're a ferry pilot. You've racked up over 9,000 flight hours. You've done 2 seasons of Discovery Channel's Dangerous Flights. You've been trained as a crew chief on Huey's in the National Guard, and you've also done a winter survival instructor's course. You're a skydive instructor with 20,000 jumps. You own Skydive Twin Cities, and you were a jump pilot as well. Your flights do ferry flying has taken to 60 countries, 3 oceans, and 50 different aircraft. Have I missed anything out there?
No, that's the high points. Yep, I do a lot.
Amazing careers. Like, how would you even start with that? Like, let's go back to the very start. And what got you into aviation?
Well, I was originally inspired by my uncle, who I'm named after, Kerry McCauley. He's a naval aviator. He flew S-2 trackers off aircraft carriers, hunting Russian subs back in the day. So I grew up listening to all his stories, and that just inspired me to be a pilot. And my first gig was, when I was 17. My friend and I joined the National Guard and went to basic training in between our junior and senior year of high school. So I was in the military before I even left school, and then became a Huey crew chief and just got started.
Brilliant, absolutely. And what made you want to become a Huey crew chief? Is there anything in particular that jumped out at you that thought, oh, I want to do that?
No, that was just the quickest way I could get on a flight crew. I mean, you didn't have to be an officer, go to college or anything, immediately go to Huey maintenance and crew chief school, and boom, you're on flight crew right off the bat. So yeah, by 18 I was flying.
Brilliant. And what does crew chief kind of instruction look like? What would you have to do now to become, before you were fully qualified and battle ready, as to say?
Well, to start off, the crew chiefs are first and foremost mechanics. You have to know everything about the aircraft so you can fix it if there's anything goes wrong. So you go to maintenance school. That's 90% of it. And then you learn how to sling load stuff under the helicopter. You're also the door gunner, so you're shooting the M60 machine gun out the side, which was cool. A lot of fun. And doing everything. I mean, the crew chief is actually kind of the guy in charge of the aircraft. The pilots, they just go where you tell them to go. The crew chief is the guy in the back. He's the one who's really in charge. It's his aircraft. So I really like that aspect of it.
That was brilliant. Had you any aspects when you were doing that? Had you any aspects to actually go on and fly the chopper as well, or was it just you were happy doing that?
Oh no, I was fully planning on going to either Army flight school or Air Force or Navy. But shortly after I got started that, I started taking civilian flying lessons to get started, because I just wanted to fly. I wanted to be a pilot. And I was going to college at the time, but that's when I heard about ferry flying. One of my fellow crew chiefs, his father actually owned the company, the aircraft delivery company. And he told me, hey, I said, where you been? He's like, I just got back from Africa. Africa? What the? Tell me more. And he told me all about ferry flying. And right there, I said, I have to do that. That's the job. That's the aviation job for me. I mean, there's no other aspect of aviation that really epitomizes the adventure of aviation as a ferry flight. So my career kind of took a turn right there. I said, let's go do that.
Brilliant. And obviously, when you decided you were going to do that, how far into your training were you?
I barely started. I maybe had 10 or 15 hours of flight training, so like, yeah, so it was pretty done. Like, oh, cool. What do you need to be a ferry pilot? All your ratings and 1,500 hours. Great. I've got 10 hours and 0 ratings. Let's go.
I love that. I love how you picked up exactly what you wanted to do that quite early in, because I know myself going through flight training and everything, I'm not quite sure what I want to do with this when I get to the end of it. But you had a clear goal to what you wanted to do, which is absolutely fantastic. And how did you find your flying training as you were going through it?
How did I like it? How did I find it? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, I loved it. as soon as I started flying, I knew that's where I was meant to be. I mean, I loved flying. I loved every aspect of it. I loved the technical aspect. I loved learning about the aircraft. You know, as a Huey mechanic, I was very interested in how everything on the airplane worked. I loved the flying itself. I loved navigation. I loved flying at night. I couldn't get enough of it. I just went whole hog.
Brilliant. I'm reading your book, and you seem to have quite an interesting time during your flying training with trying to impress girls and stuff like that. And when they're not meant to be in the aircraft, but taking them for dates, which is really, really funny. And can you tell us a bit about that?
Oh yeah, yeah. I have a thing. I'm not a real big stickler for rules and regulations. I kind of tend to bend things a little bit. I'm a little bit of a cowboy then, and it kind of came out right away in my flight training. Yeah, I was dating this girl, and I was just about done with my flight training, and I said, you know, I'm going to take her for a ride. And you know, so I was cleared to solo and do cross country, so I rented the airplane for my flight school and went and picked her up at a different airport, and took her for a ride. You know, thought I'd impress her, and she was thoroughly impressed. I didn't tell her I didn't actually have a license. Yeah, I just said, yeah, I'm a pilot. And so we flew around, and, you know, I said, hey, well, how about we get some dinner after this? You know, you want to go out with me, basically, you know, keep the night going? She said, sure. I go, well, I'll tell you what, we'll land back where my car is, and we'll go on from there. And as I was taxiing back up to the flight school, I realized, oh crap, I'm not supposed to have her in here. Like, duck down. She's like, what? Just duck down. At that point, I kind of had to fess up to her, like, yeah, you're not supposed to be in here. I'm not supposed to be carrying passengers. But it worked out, because here we are 27 years later, still married. I married her.
Brilliant. I love that. That's so funny. Because like you were saying, you're not meant to have her in there. But did you, when you landed at the same airport where your car was, did you forget that you weren't meant to have her in there? Or?
Pretty much. I was just enamored with her, and I'm so confident in my skills at the time. You know, I had a whole 40 hours or something. You know, like, I got this. You know, no problem. Like, oh wait, I can't. I'm supposed to do this. So yeah,
I love it. And then, so you've got your license, but then you found another kind of art in aviation, which is skydiving. How did you stumble across the sport of skydiving?
You know, I just come back. I come back from Army Air Assault School, which is where they teach you how to rappel out of helicopters, do aviation assaults from helicopters in the Army. And I tell you, rappelling out of the helicopter from 100 feet up, that was scary, because that's heights. And I loved the school, one of the hardest schools the Army has. And I got back from that, I said, that was amazing. I want to do more stuff like that. And a friend of mine knew an instructor at this little school out in the middle of the countryside in Wisconsin, and said, we should go take skydiving lessons. So I went and did that, and just loved it. And of course, on my very first jump, I had to break the rules again, you know, because that's what I do. Back then, it was so long ago. This is 1996. We didn't have radios for the students to tell them where to go, so they had a big cloth arrow on the ground, you know, a yellow arrow with a black arrow on, or yellow with a black arrow, and they would spin it around, and you're supposed to point the way it was pointing. And I jumped out and opened my parachute, and like, wow, that was amazing. I love this. And I looked back at the field, and the arrow was pointed in a direction that I didn't agree with, because I had all this experience, you know, none. And I went, I just did my own thing, you know, because I'm a pilot now. Actually, I didn't even have my rating at the time. I still was halfway through my flight training, and I just flew my own pattern and came in and landed. I really did a great job, because I was kind of a natural at it, you know. And boy, they were mad that I didn't listen to them at all. They were fit to be tied, but I was hooked. Skydiving was amazing.
Brilliant, because I've done it myself. I've been brought up around the Irish Parachute Club, so I know exactly what you mean about the arrow and everything as well. But it's a feeling that you can't really describe to anybody when you do it and afterwards. So you got hooked by the adrenaline, and you just went and did more. And before you before you know it, you found yourself where you are now, I'd say.
Yeah, I was just hooked. I did 2 jumps that first day, and I never went back. I just been jumping constantly since then. And yeah, right now I have all my ratings, 20,000 jumps. Went to the wind tunnel yesterday. My daughter works. I'm out here in California visiting right now, and indoor skydiving. I'm kind of sore from the wind tunnel, but in another couple hours, I'm going back and do some more indoor skydiving. That's what I do.
I love it. Absolutely love it. So, Kerry, how long was it then? Because you became a jump pilot, basically. So you were flying the guys to altitude and dropping them out. How long was it before you actually decided that? Because I know you were chatting to one of was it a chief instructor at the time or the DZ owner, that you needed him to let you to start flying jumpers?
I started skydiving and, immediately continued to start my flying training. But I knew that skydiving can get expensive, and so I figured it's a good way to make some money. So as soon as I had my pilot's license, probably within the first year of getting my skydiving license, I hit up the owner to start letting me fly jumpers. So within the year,
Brilliant. So it didn't take it that long. And in your book, you described about what your kind of induction to dropping skydivers was like, and you had the club chief instructor kneeling behind you, shouting orders at you, basically in your ear. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, that's how you check people out in skydiving planes, because they only have the one seat, the seat for the pilot. And yeah, he would just kneel behind me and say, do this, do that, open the door, let the first load of jumpers out, a couple of practices, and then think you got it? Yep. And he opens the door and he jumps out, and boom, I'm solo in the plane. And since then, that's how I check out pilots now too. And when I check out skydive pilots, so I do the same thing, and I don't tell them I'm going to do that. That's always a surprise. Like, we do some landings, like, I think you got it. He goes, yeah, I think I got it. I go, good. I'll open up the door and I jump out. And they're like, okay, I guess I'm alone now.
It's like a baptism of fire when your instructor just disappears out the door and it's like, where's he gone?
Pretty much.
Did he give you any heads up that he was going to do that at all, or did he just go for it?
Nope. I think everybody who teaches skydiving, that's how they do it. It's great to spring it on them.
Brilliant. I feel sorry for the poor students sometimes.
Yeah.
And then you had quite an interesting experience flying formation into a cloud then, which is part of your book as well, and it was quite a hair that would probably turn most people off of flying, where you went in and your artificial horizon wasn't working.
Yeah. Most of the planes, back then the skydiving planes were really rough. I mean, they took out everything they could that wasn't necessary, because you want the plane to be as light as possible because you're climbing to altitude. And a lot of times the instruments didn't work because they're expensive to fix, and these are clubs and not a lot of money. So most of the airplanes have great big gaping holes in the instrument panel where instruments usually are. And the plane I was flying, the artificial horizon never worked from day one. I'd never seen it work, and the DG didn't work, and pretty much all you have is the compass. And I know even on that one, the turn coordinator didn't work. So really all you had was the airspeed indicator, compass, and the ball, which is absolutely not enough if you're going to fly into clouds. And that particular day, we went into clouds. It really surprised me. We were in a 3-plane formation climbing up to 10,000 feet, and the lead pilot was the chief pilot. He was my mentor. I mean, I think he had 5,000 hours at the time and done everything. And you assume that guy is God. I'll follow him anywhere. And we turned a corner around a cloud, and we're headed right for a big monster cloud. And I was like, why aren't we turning? We shouldn't fly into that. That's bad. I know I'm new, but I know that's bad. And we plowed right into it. And so we scattered. And I had no instruments to maintain control of the plane, so I just tried to keep it as slow as possible. But all of a sudden the airspeed starts building. It got really dark in that cloud. Even picked up a little bit of ice.
Wow!
And it looked like I felt the G forces pushing me down in the seat, and I didn't know, am I in a spin? am I vertical? Am I inverted? I have no idea. Pull the throttle back to keep the speed, but I was doing everything I could to keep the wings from being ripped off the plane. And we came out of the bottom of the cloud at about a 7-degree bank and going really fast. That was exciting.
It sounds exciting, and I'd say the poor jumpers in the back were kind of happy when you came out and you were still in one piece and flying and managed to recover it. Did you get to drop them afterwards, or did you just land?
Oh no, they jump. You skydivers never land in the airplane. If you want to scare the hell out of a skydiver, you make them land in the plane. Yeah, even after that, they said we'd like to get out now, please. We've had enough of this flying and airplane stuff. Can we leave? We're like, it's actually pretty testament to their faith in me that they were still there, because at any point during that whole emergency, they could have said, you know what, bye, open the door. Looks like you got some problems on your hand. I think we're going to go skydiving now and let you deal with this yourself. So
no, they took up that sharing is caring aspect of it. Share the problem.
Right.
You had to do talking about skydivers landing in the aircraft with you. You had an engine failure in it. It was a Cessna 182 with a load of skydivers in it.
Yeah. We'd just taken off. I was only about 2,500 feet AGL. And there was a huge bang, and the engine started shaking really bad. And I immediately turned back toward the airport and tried to figure out what the problem is. But it was quite violent, and throttled the engine way back, and we were going down. And after a few seconds, I get a tap on the shoulder, saying, "Hey, can we leave?" I'm like, "You're still here? Why are you guys still here?" The second it did that, they should have left. And by the time they kind of got their act together, we were going through 1,500 feet, and it's just too low. I was like, I'm sorry, you guys missed your chance. Now we're all in this together. We get the dead stick an airplane together. Tell me how I do after we landed. I managed to get her back to the runway, and they were quite unhappy that they had to land in the plane. They wanted to get out really bad.
I can imagine. I can imagine when you turned around after you stopped the aircraft on the runway, they'd all be sitting there with scorecards with 10 and 9s on them and stuff, because rating how you did.
Yeah, they were pretty happy that I did a good job and got them to the ground in one piece.
That's always a bonus, and especially when it comes to aviation, because when things go wrong, they go really, really wrong. So the fact that you were able to walk away from it with everybody and the aircraft still in one piece is a testament to yourself and stuff. So that's a really, really cool thing to have done. But you're building your hours. You need to get ratings under your belt, because you still haven't made it to ferry pilot yet. So you went out and bought a twin.
Yeah, we bought a friend and me and a couple of buddies, Army helicopter pilots, bought a twin Comanche, real nice light twin, super plane, real sweet. Even had a picture of Snoopy on the tail. That was pretty cool. Multi-engine hours.
That was it. And how many did you need before the ferry guys would even look at you?
Well, I don't remember how many multi-engine hours you needed. I think it was a couple of hundred, but they, for sure that you had to have your multi-engine rating and some experience, because a lot of the planes are multi-engine planes. The interesting thing is when we bought that plane, one of the three partners didn't have a license at all. And the two of us, we didn't have our multi-engine rating, so we took our training in that plane and got our multi-engine ratings in it. But at the time, the two of us, my friend and me and my best friend, we had maybe 100 hours apiece. So we're pretty inexperienced and bought a twin.
That's mad. And did you find it as an advantage with learning in your own aircraft to opposed to renting an aircraft to go and learn in?
Yeah, I really liked having our own airplane, because a few maintenance issues came up, and my friend, he was also a former Army crew chief, so mechanic, so we both worked on the airplane, saved a little money there. Whenever we needed to use it, it was available. We didn't have to fight other students for the plane. And you really got to know that plane, and we just hired an instructor to teach us in it, and it worked out really well.
That's good. It sounds like you had a bit of fun with it, but it was lucky for yourselves, but not lucky for the aircraft. It ended up coming to an untimely end, didn't it?
Yeah. I just my buddy, he got his multi-engine rating first, And then him and the other partner who didn't have any ratings at all, they went to Army helicopter school. And I stayed home because I wasn't going to do that. And I got my multi-engine rating. And then one Christmas, I flew down to their flight school to pick them up to bring them home for Christmas and to build some more multi-engine time, which is why we bought the plane. We flew home, had a good Christmas, and on the time to bring them back to flight school, it was a pretty cruddy day. A big snowstorm was hitting Minnesota, and we had brought along another guy, and we decided that the other pilot, the other of us three owners, he wanted to sit up front because he never got to fly an airplane that he owned, and he didn't have a license, but he figured he'd sit up front. So I had to sit in the back, and my friend Lee and John, the other two owners, they sat up front. And neither of those guys also had an instrument rating, so we're taking off in low clouds and heavy snow. But we figured we could go eastbound, skirt around the storm, underneath the clouds, VFR, and then get clear and then head south. And we flew along for a ways, and the clouds got lower and lower, and the snow got heavier. And after a while, I was like, this is kind of stupid. This is how guys get killed. Maybe we should land. The other pilot that we'd picked up to get a ride home with us, another Army pilot, he had his multi-engine instrument rating. So let's put the guy with the instrument rating up front. That probably is a good idea. So we were going to land at this little airport in Wisconsin to change pilots. And it took us a while to find it in the snowstorm, but we found it. I was pretty happy sitting in the back, like, okay, we didn't die so far. We're on, it's over the runway, starts flaring. And I look out at the side of the window, I'm like, boy, I've never been in the back of the plane when it was landing. And I thought to myself, boy, that's an odd angle. It's really nose high. It almost sure feels weird back here. It almost feels like we're going to hit the tail first. And then we hit tail first, which is not the correct technique if you're going to land a light twin. You want to land on the rubber things, the tire stuff. Those
round ones,
not the tail. Because what the pilot was trying to do, he'd been flying nothing but helicopters for 6 months, and he literally, out of muscle memory, he tried to hover a twin Comanche. And as any of you aviation nuts know, you can't hover a twin Comanche, a light plane. You need to be like a helicopter type aircraft. And yeah, so we hit tail first. It skipped once. It skipped the second time, and I screamed power because we were going to stall and crash right there. And he jammed the throttles full forward, and the second he did that, the aircraft torque rolled 90 or 45 degrees to the left, pointed 45 degrees off the runway, and the weirdest thing happened for me. Time stood still. It was just like the Matrix. I don't know if you heard people describe this when they're in car accidents, like everything was in slow motion. It absolutely stopped for me. I could see everything as clear as a bell. It was so weird. I looked like, okay, well, our left wingtip is going to hit that snowbank right there. We're going to cartwheel across that ditch. We're going to cartwheel across that little field there into that line of trees. And I'm not even wearing my seatbelt. We're dead. And I put my hands down, and time started again. But my friend at that point saved our lives. He chopped the throttles, leveled the wings. We hit the snowbank belly first, skipped over that ditch, level, slashed down on the ground on the other side, and did 360s like a frisbee along the ground before coming to a stop. And that was the end of Snoopy. Smoke was coming out of the wings, and we were like, holy shit, we just crashed. Let's get out of here. And we set the land speed record for 4 big guys getting out of that twin Comanche, I tell you.
And at any point, like it's quite traumatic experience. At any point did you think, nah, this isn't for me anymore?
No. That's the weird thing about a lot of my career. I've had way more than my share of emergencies in both skydiving and flying. And for some reason, I don't really get affected by that. I might get the shakes afterwards, and the adrenaline shakes. The knees are going. It's like, holy cow. But I've got this weird sense of it's going to be okay. I'm going to survive this stuff. I don't know how that is. You know, since I was a young boy, I'd always kind of pushed myself into as many dangerous and emergency situations as I could. I just kind of, that's kind of who I am. It's what I love doing. And I think handling emergencies is a lot like any other skill, like skiing or riding a bike or anything. The earlier you start, the better you are at them. Just like learning a language. A little 3-year-old learns a foreign language super easy. You know, I started it right away. And so I've just kind of developed this skill at being calm in emergency situations. And even at, which has really saved my life many times. But even afterwards, it's like, wow, that was exciting. Let's go do it again.
I completely agree with what you mean about what you're saying. The earlier you start with it, the more accustomed you become to being put under that pressure and having to think on the spot. Because you said it a few times in your book, which I quite like as well, is if you've got time to panic, you've got time to do something about the emergency, which has obviously worked for you because here we are.
Yeah, still here. Yeah, that's the hardest thing to teach people. I mean, there's so many people, especially not especially pilots, but a lot of pilots these days. A lot of society, you know, wraps kids in bubble wrap. You know, everything is safety, 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 safety. You know, wear helmets, don't do that. That's, you know, and so they grow up not skinning their knees, not banging their head, not getting into trouble. So. And they're like flight schools these days, a lot of the planes, they're pristine. They got glass cockpits and they're just well maintained. Nothing ever breaks. And I run into pilots and skydivers that they have their first malfunction or emergency at the, you know, in their mid-20s to early 30s. And you never know how they're gonna perform. It's like, that's the first time anything's ever happened to you. Wow. I mean, by the time I was 17, I'd rung my bell lots of times, and so hopefully they get it.
Yeah, like I'd say what you're saying is really, really true, and the more people are exposed to it, probably the better, because you wouldn't crumble under the pressure. Which is bringing me on to the next point, because this is where you need to have your head about you. So you've got your hours, you've gone to your friend's dad, and you've asked him for a job. And he said yes. So now you're about to start ferry flying. Where was your first ferry flight to?
The first flight I got hired to do was it was a Beach Duchess, which is a small light twin, and he'd hired me to ferry it from St. Paul, Minnesota, which is kind of by Chicago for you in the UK, and all the way to Lisbon, Portugal. So our first route was going to be St. Paul to Bangor, Maine. That's where we cleared customs. And then from there to St. John's, Newfoundland. That's the island on the east coast of Canada. And from there, it's going to be 1,500 miles of open ocean down to Santa Maria in the Azores. And that was my first test. I mean, they didn't have me start doing any small ferry flights, anything around the US. Like first one, Portugal.
It was kind of nice, though, to give you 2 engines across the Atlantic rather than just the one.
Well, they actually had to, because back then, to ferry a single engine plane over the ocean, you needed a single engine waiver from the Canadian government, because they'd had to spend so much time and money looking for dead pilots out over the Atlantic who were ferrying. So they made a rule that, you know, you could ferry the first time by yourself if you had 2 engines, but to go on a single, you had to get tested by the Canadian government. So that first one was a twin, but I was alone in the cockpit. You know, it was all me.
Because you were going the same place as your boss, but wasn't there a law that you had to have a 20-minute gap between you or something? So he had to go first, and then it was yourself that followed.
Yeah, which is unfortunate, but you know, the Oceanic Control made us be separated 15 to 20 minutes in between takeoff, so we didn't run into each other, I guess. So even though we were in the same sky, he was flying a Turbine 206. We were, you know, 50, 60 miles apart.
And when you lined up, because I remember you saying in the book you were sat there lined up, was there at any point you thought, oh, I'm just going to turn around and shut this down because this is quite scary?
Yeah, it was really interesting as I sat there. And let me tell you, 15, 20 minutes waiting for your turn to fly over the ocean for the first time is an eternity. Yeah, you're like checking everything 15 times, and then you're just like waiting for this like that. So that took a long time, and that thought really ran through my head. You know, am I really going to do this? Am I brave enough? Do I have the skills? Am I really crazy enough? And it really wasn't a serious thought to me that I wouldn't. You know, I was honest with myself and really asked myself, are you really ready to do this? And it was just, of course. You know, I almost was asking myself that question out of obligation. Like, I suppose I should seriously look at the pros and cons of this, but my inner crazy, scary Kerry said, well, of course we're doing this. Let's come on, let's go. What's the question? Obviously, we're going to do this. It's not a serious question whether we're really going to do it or not. It's like, yeah, we're doing this. That's kind of how I am. That's how I got my nickname, Scary Kerry. I analyze things very carefully, but in the end, I pretty much do it.
I like that. So it wasn't even really a question; it was just a thought, and it was just brushed to the side really quickly. Of yeah, no, we're going to put the throttle to the stop, so we're going to do this.
Pretty much.
So your first crossing, it went really smooth, didn't it? Until your boss had lost his vacuum pump, just off the Azores.
Yeah. I was, you know, you have all these thoughts in your head, you know, like, what are all the things that can go wrong to me? I wasn't worried about him. He'd 10,000 hours. He'd done hundreds of crossings. He's the expert, you know. And nothing bad happened to me. I'm like, this is great. I was having a great day until he called me and he lost his vacuum pump. So I was like, oh, geez, that's kind of serious, especially because he's an old guy, kind of as old as I am now. I hate to think about that. It's like, I remember he was so ancient at the time. Then they're like, yeah, I'm that age now, or maybe even a little older. So I think I'm old. But yeah, he hadn't practiced his no gyro partial panel stuff in 30 years. And so he was pretty nervous about it. So we came up with a solution. He was going to use me as his artificial horizon. We'd fly formation because the first half of the trip was beautiful sunny weather, but the second half was in the dark. The forecast was for low clouds, high winds, and heavy rain. So he was pretty nervous about doing that with a partial panel. So we went to the first island in the chain of the Azores, and he circled there and waited for me. And we caught up. He flew formation on me all the way to Santa Maria, which was kind of scary because no, we hadn't practiced that at all. And his formation skills weren't really awesome at that point in his career, if they ever were. And so I'd look over my shoulder and see that red and green position lights, you know, coming closer, backing up, all over, like, Jesus, don't hit me. But we made it.
That's it. But wasn't it like that? Wasn't the end of the debacle when you called for landing? Didn't they refuse you a formation landing?
Right. It's like, well, that would have been so easy. They're like, no, like, great. So he had this brilliant idea. He didn't want to fly a partial panel approach, so he figured he'll circle there and wait for me to go in and land because they wanted us to separate. And I was to tell him how low the clouds were, and if they weren't too bad, he was gonna, on his own, just out over the ocean, descend down until he got below the clouds at night in the rain, in complete darkness, to find the VFR, the fine, tiny 1,000-foot layer of clear air, and then he could hopefully see the island, the lights of the island, and fly to it visually. That was his plan, which I thought was pretty stupid, but hey, he was the boss. So I shot the approach, and I believe it was like 800 to 600 feet broken. It wasn't horrible. And so I landed, and when he finally came in, he was kind of upset because he scared the hell out of himself because he didn't break out to 500 feet or so and very nearly ran into the ocean. So yeah, that was my first transatlantic leg in my ferry flying career. Quite.
You didn't even get to the end of your ferry flight. That was on the very first leg. Where
Right, we're still in the middle, and all that had already happened. I'm like, wow, so this is ferry flying. Nice. I love it. I thought that was cool as hell. I really did. Like, that's awesome. I want to do this for a living. I just loved it.
How did the rest of the legs go to Portugal? Did that go? It couldn't have got much worse than that, really.
The Portugal wasn't too bad. We had to stay there for a couple of days while they shipped him another vacuum pump, and then we put a new vacuum pump on his plane on the ramp in Santa Maria. And no, neither one of us have our A&P, but that's a long time ago, and he's dead, so he can't get in trouble. So yeah, we got to dropping the plane off in Portugal was that was the uneventful part of the trip.
Because you had then have to take the 206 on to Switzerland, if I recall.
Yeah. So we went to stopped in Palma, Mallorca, and dropped off some airplane parts that we had kind of smuggled in. Didn't clear customs there. Had a good friend there. My boss liked to smuggle airplane parts into Europe because the customs was too high. So every time, like, my plane was loaded full of airplane parts. I asked, like, so what's all this? They're spares, and they're like, they're not spares. These parts are not for this plane. I know our plane parts. This is like, well, yeah, we're smugglers, huh? Yeah, we're smugglers. Like, well, at least it wasn't drugs. Okay. So we stopped there, and then we flew from there to Switzerland. And we did that at night in the snowstorm, of course, because that's what you do when you're a ferry pilot. You don't wait for good weather. You fly in. It almost seems like we find the worst weather possible to fly in. That's just kind of what it seems to be. And so he was flying, he had me navigating, and we're going up an airway. And Switzerland College says, when you reach this radial off the Zurich VOR, turn in on that radial. And I said, okay. And I tuned in the VOR and tuned in that radial, and the needle swung to the left or right. I can't remember. Swung to the right. And my boss saw that, goes, oh crap, we passed it. And he immediately did a right turn to go back to that radial because he thought we'd passed that intersection. And I'm screwed. No, we haven't passed it. The needle is supposed to be that way. And no, we passed it. And he finished about a 180-degree turn. And we're at night in a snowstorm over the Alps. We're pretty high. I think we're at 12,000 feet, and a lot of the Alps are higher than that. And ATC calls up and says, hey, where are you guys going? And he goes, I'm sorry, we passed that field. We're turning back toward it now. And they said, no, you're not there yet. Keep going. Like I'm thinking, see, I told you. And he goes, oh, shit. He didn't say anything. So he turns back. So he'd made a right turn, and then he made a left turn to go back to the heading. So instead of continuing at 360 and putting us on the original course, he'd done a big S. And now we were a number of miles right of our original course that we were supposed to be on this airway, which is there for a reason, to keep you from hitting those granite clouds called mountains. And so it was kind of quiet in the cockpit. I didn't want to give him a big old I told you so, because it's my first trip and he's the boss, and he's mad because he's screwed up in front of the new guy. And we're just sitting there, and we had that plane had a radar altimeter. And I watched it, and it said 0 or full deflection, whatever it should be when you're at 12,000 feet. And I saw it twitch, and I just happened to be looking at it. I'm like, that's weird. It shouldn't do that. And it twitched again, and then it went up a bit, and then it went whoop to about 500 feet, and then whoop back down, like, or less than 500 feet. Like, holy shit, there's only one thing that makes a radar altimeter register, and that's stuff. It's mountaintop. Like,
solid stuff.
Shit, Pete, climb. We just flew over a freaking mountain. You're like, oh Jesus. So yeah, that was then we, the rest of the flight into Zurich was uneventful, but that ended my very first ferry flight or ferry trip, and boy, it was an interesting one, I tell you.
It certainly was, and judging by reading from the rest of them, that was just the beginning. It didn't stop there. It got more and more interesting. Like your first trip down through Africa, where you had lost instruments and had to fly had to hand fly the whole thing, and you lost your GPS. Yeah, tell us about that.
Losing the alternator or being lost? There's two parts of that.
Let's start with the alternator.
Yeah, so I'd ferried a plane to Tanzania from St. Paul, and I left. There's a leg from Agadir, Morocco to Abidjan, the Ivory Coast, and it's flying straight south down the bulge of Africa over the Sahara. And you fly that route at night because down along the equator, it's an area called the Intertropical Convergence Zone, and that is an area of the world that pretty much guaranteed big thunderstorms every afternoon. So to avoid those, you fly that route at night. You leave about 10 o'clock at night, fly all night. It's about a 14-hour leg, and arrive down in the Ivory Coast in the morning because the weather's usually calm in the morning. So I'd left Agadir, Morocco right ahead of a sandstorm. They kind of kicked me out of there earlier because the sandstorm was right on, approaching the airport quickly. So I got out of there, and right after I took off, they told me the airport's closed. So no, that's my back door was shut. And the 14-hour leg down to Abidjan, there's only one airport right in the middle. It's in Bamako, and it's a place my boss told me you don't ever want to go there. But I had plenty of gas, ferry tanks in the plane. And about 3 hours into it, an RBL came on. RBL stands for really bad light. It's those red lights on the instrument panel. You don't want to see RBLs. I looked at it like, alternator, huh? Look at the ammeter, and it's showing a little draw. I'm like, yep, I lost my alternator. Great. Oh, well. Go back to your training, like, okay, shut everything off I can. Autopilot, unfortunately, that takes a lot of juice. Turn the lights all the way down. And the last thing I did was we had an HF radio in the plane that's kind of like a ham radio. We put them in the planes when we ferry fly so we can talk long distances. And I keyed the mic to tell ATC that they weren't going to hear from me for the rest of the night because wasn't going to have any electricity. And when I keyed the mic, I realized I made a huge mistake because all the lights in the plane just went completely black, and I just sucked all the juice out of my battery because the HF radio uses a ton of power. I'm like, oh crap, that was stupid. I got my flashlight out and shining instrument panel because it's completely dark outside. I mean, even if I wasn't in the clouds, you're out over the Sahara and there's not a light at all. So there's no horizon. There's no visual clues at all. And as you know, if you can't see outside, you need to use your instruments. You got to be able to see them. And at night, if you don't have instrument lights, you need a flashlight. So that was the start of a really long night, 8.5 hours flying by flashlight. And that was hard and long. That was also the night I learned the lesson. If you're going to fly at night, always carry 2 flashlights. Yeah, I didn't have 2 flashlights. This is before cell phones. That was my only form of illumination. And when it came time to change the batteries in the flashlight, I realized this is scary. If I screw this up, I'm gonna die. I mean, where are you ever in a situation where if you drop a battery while changing lights in a flashlight, you die? Because if I drop the batteries, I wouldn't be able to see the lights in the instrument panel. I'd lose control of the plane. So I practiced that a few times before I actually did it, but I was successful. And but the sun finally came up, and I had to do some interesting navigation to find the airport. Finally found it, which was quite a relief. No radio, couldn't get a hold of the tower. They didn't have a light gun. They even buzzed them. They weren't waking up. So I just had to pump the landing gear down because I was flying a Cessna 210, so it's retractable gear. And there's no way to you pump until it stops pumping. There's no way to tell if your gear's down and locked because the green lights don't work. And then just come on in and land. And and you would think that would be the end of it. Like, hey, you made it. Nope. They came and dragged me into the airport manager's office. He was all yelling at me, all pissed off, wanted to throw me in jail. Where have you been? You should have been talking to people. Like, I had an emergency. Like, you didn't want to hear it. But he was going on vacation that evening and didn't want to deal with me, so he kicked me out of his office after I wrote up a report. That was just the first, not even the first, that was just one section of that huge trip. I mean, after that, I flew to Gaboon. My GPS crapped out for good halfway there. This was back in the days when GPS was just invented. They weren't very good. Then the next flight, I was flying from Libreville, Gaboon, all the way across the entire continent of Africa to Dodoma, Tanzania. And I arranged for a weather briefing that morning because I'm flying across an entire continent. So you want to have a pretty detailed weather briefing, you know, it's kind of good. And I got there and the guy handed me a mimeograph paper that it was a infrared satellite shot of the continent of Europe, or I mean of Africa, and said, he showed me the two white blobs on one side that were major thunderstorm areas. You see this? Very, very bad. You see this? Very, very bad. Handed me the paper and told me to have a nice flight. And that was it. No forecast, no winds aloft, no nothing. Just, this is what Africa looks like. Well, yeah, I know what Africa looks like. So took off, and that flight was going to be, I mean, I knew I was going to have, with the GPS down, I knew there was going to be about a 6 to 8 hour window in there that I wasn't going to have any nav aids, you know, no NDBs, no VORs. I accepted that with no winds aloft forecast. It was just like point east. And I got to the point where I just started picking up VORs, and I didn't pick up the first VOR. And I'm thinking, well, okay, am I lost? Am I so far off course that I mean, I should get this VOR out a couple hundred, at least 100 miles. I mean, how lost am I? And that area came and went, and the sun went down, and I had to battle a line of thunderstorms, and the next VOR that I should be picking up came and went, and I couldn't pick up that one either. And at that point, I'm really questioning my my navigational skills. Like, okay, here I am at night somewhere over Africa with haven't had a nav aid in 8 hours. Cool. Nice. They're having a good time, digging it. Figures like, do I kind of take a left and try to find the city of Nairobi? I mean, it's a big city. Maybe I can find that. I was kind of worried about missing the shoreline and flying out over the Indian Ocean, because that's a definite possibility if there's no lights down there. But I decided to press on with my original heading, my flight plan heading, just because it didn't seem that windy. So I think I shouldn't be too far off. And eventually I hit the NDB at the destination, which was quite a relief. See that needle start flickering, like, yes, civilization, the world exists. Came in and landed, and I was talking to the pilots that worked there. We were having dinner, and I told them my story. And they kind of looked at each other like, well, didn't anybody tell you those two VORs, they never work because they're run by generators, and as soon as the government delivers the gas to them, the local warlords come and steal the gas. So I'm like, oh, great. I mean, little information I could have used about 12 hours ago, guys. So that was an interesting trip. That was really
like most people don't get these stories from years and years of flying, and this for you was just one trip.
Yeah. It's like, oh, that's Thursday.
But going back to what you were saying about loving the adventure and all that, I bet you that didn't even faze you.
No, it didn't. Which is weird. I sometimes I'm kind of honest with myself, and I examine that part of who I am. It's like, this stuff should really make you nervous. Why do you keep doing this? Like, because I love it. Like that trip, I loved that trip. I love nothing more than an emergency, a parachute malfunction. If I have to cut away my chute and go to the reserve, I love it. I've had to do it 26 times. I love it. It's another little bit of an extra excitement in an otherwise boring day of skydiving,
Yeah. It's
as long as I can find a way out, that's great, because anybody can fly an airplane on a beautiful, calm, sunny day. It takes a real pilot to handle the emergency because that's what you're paid for. That's why you get the big bucks at some point. Those aren't big bucks, but that's why you do all that training. You train for the emergency. And if you get that emergency and you handle it properly and you come through, that's quite an achievement. You know, I love that. Now, for some people, they don't want that. They want nothing to ever go wrong, and I don't fault the person for that at all. They're the normal people. I'm the abnormal one. I fully admit that I am a sick and twisted individual, and yeah, my life is not a how-to book. This is don't you shouldn't describe to be me. I should be dead a number of times over, but I'm not. So, but a lot of it's just, you know, a lot of it's luck too.
Yeah, I remember we're always told, and you were probably the same. You said it in the book a few times. You've got a bag of luck and a bag of experience, and by the time that the bag of luck runs out, you should have a bag full of experience.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of where I'm at in my career. I've still got some luck in there. I've had a couple of things every once in a while that was kind of lucky, but my experience really helps, and it's actually allowing me to avoid a lot of these emergency situations, because I realize, okay, in this situation, here's my back door, there's my out, and this equipment is going to come in handy in case something happens. Because you got to remember, luck is really opportunity, where opportunity meets experience and preparedness. You know, I mean, when I lost the alternator over Africa, it was luck. It wasn't just luck that I was able to hand fly all night by flashlight and find the airport and pump the gear down and come through safety. I mean, I had been flying for a while at that point, and I was able to not panic, figure stuff out, and, you know, make my way through the rest of the night, you know.
Because that came in handy for you, because you had a scenario where you had a different kind of setup for your ferry tank, and your ferry tank wasn't pressurizing to start putting fuel into the wing tanks. And your quick thinking, you managed to figure that out. Yeah,
I was flying a F-33 Bonanza, was delivering it to Paris, and when I got to St. John's, you know, we had ferry tanks in the planes. I looked at the winds aloft. Now, the original plan was to go down to the Azores, which is our normal plan, it's 1,500 miles, and then refuel, spend the night, and then go up to Paris from there. And when I looked at the winds aloft in Canada, I saw that it had smoking tailwind straight across the Atlantic at 15,000 feet and above. That would allow me to skip the Azores. I thought, like, it's a long trip. It's 2,500 miles, but with I think it was like a 50-knot tailwind, I could make it all the way across in one leg, and, you know, I'd save a day. I wouldn't have to go down to the Azores, so I would save all the fuel going down to the Azores and up. I'd save the hotel, save the company the hotel fee, the taxi, the food, the whole day of everything. So, because remember, that's the goal of a ferry pilot, is to deliver the airplane as cost efficiently as possible. Anywhere you can save a dime, that's pretty much profit for the company. And being able to skip the Azores would save the company quite a bit of money. And that was the only reason that I decided to go to Paris and skip the Azores. The fact that I was going to have another full day in Paris to myself had nothing to do with it. I swear to God. It's single guy in Paris is, you know, why would I want that?
That must have been terrible.
So I opted to take the little more dangerous route to Paris. Okay, so I did. What do you want? And the way we had that ferry tank set up was, usually the ferry tanks they're metal tanks inside the plane, and we run an air pressure line from the top of the tank down through the bottom to the belly of the aircraft. And usually we take an inspection plate that has a hole drilled in it, and we mount a J tube through that inspection plate and point it into the slipstream, and that ram air pressurizes the tank and forces the fuel from the ferry tank out to the wing tanks. But on this particular trip, I don't remember why, but we didn't have an access cover panel with a hole in it, and it was a brand new plane. And the boss said, "There's no way he's drilling a hole in the bottom of this brand new plane." So what he was going to do is, what they did, him and the mechanic, they mounted that J tube kind of sticking sideways through the side of one of these access panels and screwed it on as tight as they could and held it in place with a bunch of duct tape, which when I saw that at first, like, that looks pretty sketchy. But, you know, went and jiggle, you know, you wiggle it a little bit, like, seems secure. He says, it'll work. You know, these are the guys with all the experience, and just try it out on the way to Maine, try it to St. John's. If it works, fine, keep going. Like, okay. So it worked for the two previous days, so I was pretty confident in it. And confident means complacent, and never get complacent. That's my biggest problem these days. I really have to fight complacency, because I do, you know, for me, jumping in an airplane and flying some places like hopping in your car and going to the store. I do it so much. Same thing with skydiving, and I really have to force myself not to be complacent. To, like, hey, remember, this is dangerous. Do your checks, do your stuff. So, and that night, I was still in my bulletproof young man complacent part of my career. So I just took off and headed out over the Atlantic. About 4 hours into it, my wing tanks were getting pretty low. So I switched on the ferry tank, and it's got a plastic sight gauge behind it, and went back to read my book. A few minutes later, I noticed that the fuel wasn't moving. Uh-oh. Oops. That's not good. Like, I switched the tank, right? It should work. Yeah, it should. Like, it's really at that point I realized what a huge mistake I'd made, because I should have tested the ferry tanks earlier while I was still, before I hit the point of no return. So the point of no return, or they also called the equal time point, is when you're flying out over the ocean. That's the point where it's an equal time distance to the far shore or where you left. And once you pass that, you can't turn around, because you won't make it. You don't have the fuel to make it back to Canada, especially with the headwinds that I would have been fighting. So I really needed that gas, because I definitely didn't have enough fuel to make it to Paris, even to Ireland, where I was going to kind of be close to. So I jiggled the handle, and I did a bunch of zero-G maneuvers, try to shake it, and that didn't work. And I took apart the air pressure line, and that should give me a blast of pressurized air, and it didn't. And I figured that's the problem. My pressure line's bad. And I sat there and thought about it. It's like, I got to pressurize this tank. Somehow I got to pressurize it. What can I do? And I looked at that hose, like, suppose I could blow in it, like you're blowing up an air mattress. And I did that. I sat and blew as long as I could until I couldn't get any more pressure in it, which wasn't long, because the tank was pretty full. And I put my thumb over it and I watched, and a couple of minutes later, it worked. It moved some fuel. Like, wow, awesome. I have a solution. And I did some math to try to figure out how many times I'm going to have to do this. And the math took me a long time, because number one, I was flying at 15,000 feet with no oxygen. Should have had oxygen, but we don't have it. I almost never fly with oxygen. But back then I have a really good high altitude tolerance. I fly up really high. Not technically legal, but yeah, I do that anyway. But you're good at flying at high altitude as long as you don't move around a lot or exert yourself much. If you just sit very calmly, I could fly at 18 to 20,000 feet all day long.
Wow.
But hyperventilating into a tank is pretty much the opposite of being calm and not moving. It's really exerting yourself. So that really brought on hypoxia. I'm at 15,000 feet, hyperventilating into the tank. The cabin is filled with gas fumes, because I'd opened up the top of the tank. So I was pretty stoned. And but I realized I was pretty much going to have to blow into that hose continuously for 8.5 hours to keep the engine running. And that's what I did. And let me tell you, that was a long night.
It definitely sounds like a long night. I don't envy you for having to do that at all. But you've had all these like kind of scary moments, but you've also had your fair share of awesome moments. And one of them was you were delivering a plane down to the president's son in Egypt. and you got to have an absolute blast around the pyramids.
Yeah, that's what's so great about ferry flying. You know, you do have the oh shit, dangerous, almost gonna die moments, but there's so many incredible experiences you can only have ferry flying, like the one you're talking about. I was delivering a Cherokee 6 to Anwar Sadat's son, and I picked him up in Alexandria, Egypt, which is on the coast of the Mediterranean, and we were flying together to Cairo, where he had his airport. And as we got close to Egypt, to Cairo, asked me, "Hey, have you ever seen the pyramids?" I go, "No, I've never been to Egypt before. This is awesome." I mean, I was just so psyched. I mean, that's what's so great about ferry flying. I'm getting to travel the world, and like, Egypt, awesome. I get to go to Egypt. So cool. He goes, "Well, let's go fly over the pyramids." I'm like, cool. You bet. Sign me up. And we got close to the pyramids, and like, wow, there they are, the pyramids of Egypt. You know, like one of my life's goals to fly to Egypt. And he goes, "Do you want to buzz them?" Yeah, can we? He goes, "I'm Anwar Sadat's son. I can do whatever I want." Like, cool. And so we buzzed the crap out of him. We buzzed it 3 times right over the Sphinx, really low, below the tops of the pyramids, right in between them. Want to do it again? You bet. I'm just ripping full power, fast as we can, just right on the deck, right in between the pyramids 3 times, just laughing like 2 schoolgirls, just having the time of our life. And after we pulled out that 3rd time, he goes, "Okay, we probably better get out of here." And he's like, "Even I'm going to have to do some explaining about that one, but it'll be fine." So, yeah, I mean, I get to do that stuff. I don't do it a lot anymore. Try not to lose your license, but I got to buzz down the Amazon River first thing in the morning a couple of times. It was so much fun. Buzz across the Africa savannah, looking at giraffes and elephants, and you know, I actually saw natives walking down a trail with the pots on their heads. Like, no way! I mean, it's like National Geographic. You know, just probably one of the funnest days I ever had was ferrying an Aerostar to Cyprus, and I got to the southern tip of Greenland, which is absolutely stunning. Icebergs and fjords and the ice cap and glaciers, and I was ahead of schedule, so I spent about an hour or so ripping up and down the coast. I had a slight flight control problem there. For some reason, I couldn't seem to get the plane over 50 feet over the ocean for that whole hour or so. I eventually figured it out, but it was good.
Slaloming through the icebergs till you did figure it out.
Yeah. You might gather I like to fly low, so.
You're a man of my own heart. I like being down in the weeds as well. If we go up above 2,500 feet, I start getting a nosebleed. It doesn't end well for me.
Right. I'm afraid of heights, you know.
Yeah. So, but you also had then, after all that, quite an interesting moment where you had to rob a bank.
Yeah, well, technically, I received a letter in the mail from a Spanish bank examiner who said, "Hey, there's $50,000 in the bank. Is that in this bank in Palma? Does that agree with your records?" Like, no, not really. Think I would have remembered depositing $50,000 in a Spanish bank. And it turns out that our friend in Mallorca, who run a flight school that we deliver planes to a lot, his manager had been embezzling money from his flight school, and he had stolen my identity and opened up a bank account in my name because he'd borrowed taken a copy of my passport. And so my friend wanted to know if I could steal the money back from him, essentially. I'm like, sure. See, I've got a problem. It's a medical condition. It's called can't say no-itis. You could pretty much talk me into just about anything. So, yeah, I flew over there, and we sat. I thought we were going to go into the bank with a lawyer and say, "This is a phony account. I need to have this money and give it to my friend here." And they told me that actually the plan was going to be I was just going to pretend that I was just going to demand my money back and pretend it was my money in the first place, and basically embezzle the money back from the bank and give it to my friends. So, yeah, we kind of walked into the bank, and let me tell you, that was scarier than any ferry flight I'd ever been on, because as you know, a lot of the banks in Europe, the doors lock behind you. And uh-oh. And I'm taking money out. I did not put this money in the bank. That was not my money. And the bank manager, I said, I want to close my account. And he shows me the paperwork. Is this you? And like, obvious forgery. No, I didn't sign that paperwork. It's not me. This is not my money. I did not do it. I've never been here before. And I'm lying going, yep, that's me. And, I tell you, we actually had to come back because they didn't have all the money in hand right now. So when we came back, I thought I saw undercover cops everywhere. I was terrified. And they gave us the money, and we kept expecting the cops to jump out at us. And we finally got out, and then there's 3 grown men because my buddy had brought his lawyer with us, and we just started fast walking down the sidewalk, and we turned the corner and ran like hell.
It's amazing. Again, a thing that would not have happened if it wasn't for the ferry flying. And every time you take off to do a ferry flight, it just seems like you've got a story to tell or something's gone wrong.
Oh, every time. Yeah, I've never been a ferry flight where it's been ho-hum boring the whole time. Everything. Every time there's something, which is what I love about ferry flying. I love the challenge. You know, somebody tosses me the keys to a really cool airplane, say, fly this halfway around the world. Like, cool, sign me up. And not knowing what's going to happen is the appeal. You know, I get all my stuff ready. I bring my tools. I bring my survival kit. And then it's just like, you can't really prepare for the unknown. You just have to be ready for it.
Exactly, and it beats that rat race of the 9 to 5 as well. It's not get up, go to work, come home, get up, go to work, come home. You're away for could be weeks on end with adventure, basically guaranteed. Yeah.
It's funny, you know, like at the end of each day, you get to the hotel and you lay down and you're just like, holy crap, that was a day, and tomorrow's gonna be the same.
I love it. And it's like I said, adventure staring you at the face. You know you're getting yourself into as soon as you retract the gear or the gear comes off the tarmac, and it's a bit like, oh, here we go. Right, what's in store for us today?
Yeah, I love it.
But obviously you do, and it's fantastic. I'm loving hearing the stories, but it has to come to an end at some stage. So you've done your last ferry flight, knowing that you need to retire at some point, but you've your last ferry flight you describe in your book, was that before or during the Dangerous Flight series?
That was before. Yeah, it was about 7-8 years before Dangerous Flights. Yeah, I pretty much quit because I married. I had 2 young kids. I was really pushing my luck a little bit more, even though I wasn't scared. It was, at some point I was kind of realizing I was being a little selfish with my life. You know, I mean, even though I'm not personally scared of dying, you know, I'm like living life to the fullest, and if I die, oh well. Once I had 2 young children, I realized I can't think like that anymore. It's not just me that's affected if I die. So I retired. And then Dangerous Flights came calling. And by that time, you know, my children were mostly grown. You know, I think my son was 17, maybe 16, something like that. So I figured, well, okay, if I die now, he's well on his way. I've turned him into a good functioning man. My daughter's a little older. They're good kids, so they'll be fine. So I took and it sounded like a great project, and so I started ferry flying again for Dangerous Flights, which was amazing. It was so much fun. Although I tell you, the very first ferry flight on Dangerous Flights, I hadn't done it in years. It's like you kind of think like, do I still remember how to do this? Like, and I was the only real ferry pilot on the show until Pete showed up. None of these other guys really knew. Like, wow. Stu had no idea. Yeah, none of these guys had really done it before. Marcio, then he was a real ferry pilot, he delivered jets, but I was the only true single engine piston ferry pilot on the show.
Wow.
And the people in the program at Corey, they didn't have any idea what they're doing. And so they're looking at me as the expert, like, yeah, I've done it a bunch, but it's been a long time. And like, so that was a lot of pressure. That was, and of course you gotta remember, when you're doing this with 10 cameras on you every single step of the way, every mistake you make is going to be shown to millions of people. Just so you remember, don't screw up too bad because everyone's going to see it. It's like, great, no pressure. Bring it on. I love the pressure.
I find that brilliant how it's like Corey, who was the owner and the founder of this ferry company, hadn't actually ever done it before and had no idea what you were looking at you for the expert.
Yep. He'd owned car dealerships just before the show started and wanted to get into aviation, and just kind of through happenstance started ferrying with that one Randy show. That's how the show kind of got started. But yeah, they really had almost no experience in ferrying planes at all.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was pretty much, the first season was pretty much on my shoulders to get us going. But then we started, just starting to figure it out. It worked out.
One of the episodes that stuck with me was, I think it was your first time in a jet, a proper jet, where you guys had to ferry it across. What was that like, coming from your single and dual engine piston to, I know you flew some turbines as well, but to be put in an actual jet?
That was cool. That was really cool. Like I say, I'd never flown a jet before, and I was a little. The instrument panel was kind of daunting. It was a Garmin G1000, first one I'd flown, and I'm used to steam gauges and old stuff, and it's like, wow, this is pretty cool. So I was a little behind the power curve on that. It was kind of funny. The first day when we film the show, usually the first day or at some point we meet up with a camera ship, because when we're flying the show, we don't have a plane following us. It looks like we do, but we don't. We're all by ourselves. So we always have one day that we work with either a helicopter or a ship or an airplane that has a multi-million-dollar geosynchronized, stabilized camera on it. And we go out and they get some air-to-air shots with us, stuff by clouds, stuff over some water, stuff over jungle, so they can use it during the show. And so that first morning in Australia, Marcy and I take off with the jet, and the camera ship was a helicopter. And so our job that whole afternoon was to fly with that helicopter. And helicopters are not fast like jets, so it's kind of scary. And the first day, we link up with the helicopter and fly in formation, and Marcio's trying to fly formation in a jet with a helicopter using the autopilot.
Wow, okay.
It's like clicking the autopilot left to right, and it's not working at all, and we're gonna die, and we're all over the place, and it's just not working. And I'm, because he's an airline pilot and a jet pilot, and they don't ever touch the controls. They're autopilot guys. And after about 10 minutes of near-death experience, I asked him, like, do you mind can I fly? I know I've never flown this plane before. I have zero experience, but you're really bad at this. I think we're gonna die. And I'd been on the show for a while. This was his first time in the show, so he'd never done the air-to-air stuff. And so he says, sure. And I asked him, are there any throttle restrictions? Can I wreck the engine? No, you can do whatever you want. And he didn't get to touch the controls of the airplane for the rest of the day. And I tell you, that was probably one of the funnest days of flying I've ever had, because I got to go in a jet and do wing overs with the jet and fly under the helicopter and steep turns and bust through tops of clouds and just do all kinds of. We spent the entire day, got to fly into Sydney Harbor, circle around Sydney Harbor, and Marcio just had to sit there the whole time with pouting in the side because he couldn't do it.
And it was all hand flown as well, which for a jet.
Yeah, you gotta hand fly that stuff, and he's not. Airline pilots are not hand flying pilots, so.
No, I think there was a statistic out that it was something like they fly for 6 minutes at a time, 3 minutes on takeoff and 3 minutes on landing, and then the rest is all the computer that flies for them.
Yep, pretty much. It's less than that. His whole mantra is when we hit 500 feet, autopilot on, and he wouldn't allow me to hand fly it.
Oh wow!
When we were on the real flight, like, no, even it's my turn to fly. It's like, you can fly the approach if you want to fly the approach, but even then, you want the autopilot to set you up on the approach. So it's all autopilot, which I hate. But that's their method. their job is safety and fuel savings, and I get that.
Yeah.
I understand.
Was any of that show that we seen, was any of that staged, or was that all true to life and dramatic as they made it out to be?
There's only one thing in the entire show that was staged. That was on our very first flight. I was flying to Navajo to Argentina with Stu. It might not have been the first episode, but it for whatever thing. But that was my first flight, and it was interesting. I'd done a Zoom kind of audition, and they didn't take me right away.
Oh.
And then they called me up and said, one pilot bailed out. Do you still want to be on the show? I go, sure. They go, great. Can you be in Florida day after tomorrow and fly to Argentina? Like, oh shit, you mean now? Yeah, like now. I'm like, oh, okay, get down there. But anyway, there's a scene where I'm flying over the Amazon in the Navajo where it looks like we're running out of gas, and we weren't. The thing is I hated it because it made me look like an idiot. So the thing is with the reality shows is normal reality shows, they have to make mountains out of molehills because nothing for real ever interesting happens, and they're always searching for stuff. So on that first trip, they'd come, even before we took off, they'd come up with the idea that we were going to run low on gas over the Amazon. So they even told me about it a day or two before. And I argued with the producer, I argued with the company. I said, no, it's going to make me look like an idiot. This wouldn't happen. Like, nope, we need to have drama on the show. So I agreed to it. And but we were fine fuel wise. But after that, they realized they didn't need to do that because it was all real ferry flying. They're all real planes going real places. And they didn't have to fake nothing because all that stuff really happened. I mean, they actually cut out, so you wouldn't believe the cool stuff they cut out of that show.
Oh, really?
Amazing stuff. And, the episodes weren't long enough. So, although they did over dramatize, like if they don't hurry up, they're going to have to land, dun, 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 at night. No, not at night.
Oh, I love going back to what you were saying. We need drama for the show. I was like, no, just saying Kerry out from everything that he's told us.
Yes. Don't worry. We'll have drama. He'll be fine. Now, if you watch the show, I come off a little mean on the show because right away the producer told me, okay, here's the deal, Kerry. The audience has to either love you or hate you. Just don't be boring. I figured, dibs on asshole.
I remember there was one actually where I was thinking, oh, I did that for, where your co-pilot was flying and you chopped the power on him to land it prematurely, basically. And I was like, oh, why was he doing that for?
No, that was real.
What was it?
100% real. Oh, yeah. That was the very first day flying with Corey. We were landing on a pretty short strip with a slight tailwind. And he'd already kind of gooned up the first approach, so we're coming in on a different way. And as he's coming in to land, he left about a quarter of the throttle in, and as he's flaring, he took his hands off the throttle, which is a big no-no, and was flaring. He didn't have that much time at the point. He didn't have a lot of experience, and he was going to be landing with both hands on the yoke, and with that much throttle left in, we were going to drift quite a ways down the runway. And it's my responsibility to not rake the airplane. So just instinctively, I went, whoa, you chop the throttle, man. It's not a 10,000 foot runway. This is short. And so he kind of thumped down like, I probably shouldn't have done that, but it's like, hey, made for good drama, though. That made me the control grabber.
Forever known as.
Forever known, yeah.
So that brings me on then to kind of like your adventure that you're on currently, which is you are the drop zone owner of Skydive Twin Cities. How did you manage to get into owning your own drop zone?
Well, I've been working since 3 years after I started skydiving. I became an instructor, and so that was while I was a ferry pilot. One of my off time, I was skydiving and enjoying being an instructor. Bought some airplanes, provided airplanes to a couple different drop zones. And then this particular drop zone in Baldwin, Wisconsin, which is now Skydive Twin Cities, came up for sale. and thought, that's what I want to do. I mean, I love the whole lifestyle and might as well be the boss, because I hated working for other people because they never agreed with me. So we bought that 22 years ago now. So I've been there 22 years. Yeah.
Brilliant.
I love it.
Do you fly for yourself as well as run the drop zone?
Not very much. I'm kind of the backup pilot because I've got more stuff to do. I'd rather skydive. I do enjoy flying skydivers. Right now we have our main plane is a Cessna Grand Caravan with a
very nice
900 horsepower Garrett. So much fun. You beat the skydivers to the ground. It's a rocket ship, man. It gets that 14,000 feet in 12 minutes and get to the ground ahead of the skydivers. It's really fun. But we normally have a normal full-time pilot, and I spend my day, most of the day I'm skydiving. I think I made 700 jumps last summer.
Wow, just in the summer?
Yep. 4 months, because we were locked down for 2 months for COVID, so.
Wow, it's still a hell of a lot. Because my dad used to be chief instructor in the Irish Parachute Club, and even Irish weather and stuff like that, it was never that kind of reliable as a full-time thing. But geez, 700 jumps in the summer was unheard of.
Yeah, some of our main instructors, they do over 1,000. Last year, a couple of guys did over 1,000 jumps in 4 months.
Wow, that's madness. Yeah. Is there any jump that you've done that stands out to you particularly that you always look back at and go, wow, I can't believe we did that, or I can't believe that's what we were in that situation?
Yeah, I was hired by the Shrine Circus. The Shriners in the U.S. are a charity group, and they promote circuses, and they wanted me to dress up in full clown as a clown, with the whole white makeup and the big wig and the whole works, and land in downtown Minneapolis. It's a major city to promote the circus. And so I agreed, and I was terrified because it was in the middle of all these tall buildings. I'm thinking, another one of these things I shouldn't have let myself get talked into. And we're flying along, and we're going, right up Main Street, because we couldn't get very high. It was a low jump. And the door opens too early. The pilot was an inexperienced pilot, and the door was slamming up, and I kind of deal with that. And I went to put my goggles on, and they got all the makeup on my face smeared over the lens of the goggles, and I couldn't see anything. And we're supposed to be jumping. I'm like, I can't get it on. And I threw those away, and I got a spare pair, and I couldn't fit them over the wig, and I'm struggling, and the spot's getting longer. I'm like, I was past the point where I should have jumped out, and I finally said, the heck with them. And I dove out, opened up the parachute, and I looked in the spot. There's a tiny little vacant lot in the middle of downtown that I was supposed to land in, and it was really far. I'm like, holy crap, I don't know if I'm going to make it. And everything else is tall office buildings. I mean, 100-story buildings. You're like, holy crap. But I was able to get over there, and I turned around and hit into the wind. And inside this little area, they had a big construction crane. And a gust of wind caught me, and it looked like I was going to come straight down on that and break both my legs. I'm like, wow, this is going to hurt a lot. And I sunk down below the level of the buildings. The wind died. I got a surge and came and landed right in front of the TV cameras. Like, woohoo! I meant to do that.
I love it. That's so cool, especially when it wasn't meant to work out, or when it wasn't looking like it was going to work out, and all of a sudden, bam, it couldn't have been any better.
Right, exactly. It was just like, my heart was going, oh, man. That was scary. Was
that probably scarier than some of the stuff you had with the ferry flying, or would that be that still sit on top as scary as the ferry flying?
Well, when it has stuff like that happens, it's only scary after the fact. Because again, while I was in that situation, I'm too busy to panic. I got stuff to do. It's like, even when I turned in and looked like I was going to land on that crane with all those cross members that were going to break me, I was looking like, all right, well, where do I put my legs? How am I going to, what's the best way to smash into all this metal? Because there's no sense to just going, because that doesn't help. If you got time to panic, you got time to do something more productive.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Kerry, your book is called Ferry Pilot, 9 Lives Over the North Atlantic. If anyone is interested in getting hold of that book and reading in detail about your adventures, where can they get that from?
It's available in paperback and ebook on Amazon. Should have an audio book coming out in a month or so. Or if you'd like a signed copy, you can go to my website, which is kerrymccauley.com, or email me at kerry@kerrymccauley.com. And I'll sign one and get one right out to you.
Brilliant. Kerry, you've had your fair share of adventure, and I really, really appreciate you coming on and having a chat with us this evening. Thank you so much, and have an absolute fantastic rest of your day.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Nice talking to you. Have a great